Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to talk about MITRE and how it works with Acumatica today. We will jump right in. Quick agenda for what we're going to cover today. We'll obviously speak about who MITRE is and what we're all about, and then speak about how we integrate with Acumatica and what that looks like from a workflow perspective. And then we'll jump into a demonstration. Obviously, we can talk all day, but until you see the product, it's not going to really make sense to you. So that's what we're here to do. And then we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. Like Sully said, there is a chat box, so feel free at any time to drop your questions in there, and we will definitely work them into our presentation. This presentation is for all of you here today, so we are happy to answer whatever we can during our demonstration. So to quickly hop in and introduce ourselves, my name is Sarah Marks, and I lead partnerships here at MITRE. I'm very excited to be presenting with you and working with the action team.
Awesome. And John Lawfer, one of the senior account executives here at MITRE. So I work closely with the action reps on the Acumatica side to help folks evaluate the MITRE platform and move them through the evaluation process and ultimately make a decision. So really excited to connect with you folks today and kind of understand what folks are feeling and what we need to demo on the solution. So excited to get going.
Awesome. So to hop right into it, MITRE was created about 4 years ago, and it was really created because our founders were looking at the industry and realized that construction is not easy as it is, right? I think everyone on this call understands that, but it was even more difficult to build great teams and increase your profits if you were working on systems that really weren't built for this industry, right? So things that construction has to really deal with every day, job costing, certified payroll, unions, making sure the taxes are paid correctly. Our founders found that a lot of the softwares out there for payroll specifically weren't handling those pieces accurately. And so they created MITRE. And really, when they first started, it was really just kind of looking out for those, right? Trying to figure out how we can give contractors more confidence in making sure that they are handling needs around payroll, but also just kind of the breadth and the depth of what they're doing better, right? So questions that you may find yourself asking on a weekly, hopefully not a daily basis, but questions like, am I paying my union fringes correctly? Are my multi-state taxes accurate? Obviously, if those aren't accurate, there can be huge penalties. How do I know which prevailing wage requirements that I am accountable for, depending on which state that I'm working in today? Who's going to handle this paper's timesheets, right? Are those paper timesheets even accurate? How much do I owe in per diems, right? The list goes kind of on and on here, but the lack of confidence in these kind of questions were really what spun up MITRE. And that is what led, oops, I forgot to skip to the next slide. So I was just talking to myself there, sorry, y'all. So these questions are exactly what led our founders to create MITRE's mission, which is to connect people, projects, and payments, and enable contractors to build with confidence. And over the last 4 years, we've done a really good job with that. We have over 700 contractors using MITRE today, and we think that success has really boiled down to 4 reasons. The first is our construction focus. So as I mentioned earlier, that is the only industry that we work with, and our first and foremost structure of MITRE is making sure that job costing is kind of the bones and the bread and butter of what we do. Being able to have a chain of command for timesheet approvals, and being able to have pay rate determinations that make sense so that you can kind of take those off of a manual spreadsheet that you probably have today. The next piece is compliance. I mentioned briefly, certified payroll, unions, multi-state tax filings. It gets complicated and it changes rapidly, right? And your job is to build, not necessarily to make sure that taxes are up to date. And so MITRE really makes sure that we are keeping you compliant so that you can keep doing what you do best, which is build. And then the next piece is modern APIs. We're here to talk about that today with our integration with Acumatica. It is probably not going to happen that anyone finds a jack of all trades accounting solution today. However, what you are able to do is find the best in class solutions and make a solution that looks and feels the best set of solutions for your company. And that's what MITRE is making sure that we do with our modern APIs. And then the last piece is exceptional support. You want to do business with people that you like and people that you trust, especially in a business with very small margins. And so we would make sure that from the sales process through implementation and our ongoing support team, that every time you interact with someone at MITRE, you get the feeling that we are part of your team and not just someone that you are, sending a check to on a monthly basis. So I'm going to hand it over to John to talk a little bit more about our product lines and talk a little bit more about the MITRE platform.
Awesome. Yeah. And so what does MITRE actually look like for our customers? So today we break it out into 5 core modules, as you see here. MITRE being a construction specific human capital management platform, like really just a fancy way of saying we do HR and payroll. We just only work with general contractors and subcontractors throughout the US. So today it's sold as a modular solution. I will say most customers are usually using at least 2 or 3 of these modules together, if not the full suite of solutions, as they do all complement each other very well. But being the HR system of record, right, a full HRS system, a place to manage or integrate with benefit providers, field operations to track time, equipment, quantities, and do our daily reporting, all of that flowing into payroll, where we're the full payroll processor, and then tracking the miscellaneous spend out in the field. So Sarah, if we jump to the next slide, we can kind of take a deeper dive into all of these. Won't spend a ton of time here, but I think important to understand the breadth of all the modules, like across the human resources piece. This is applicant tracking to help with hiring and post to job boards, send out those offer letters from there, put them through a digital onboarding process to collect signatures on all of our company documents that we need back, connect to their bank account and complete their withholding information, go through the I-9 process totally digital, and have that send off to E-Verify through our integration to make sure they're everything checks out and that employee is ready to enter the field, and ultimately we're set up for payroll and ready to start paying them. All the way down to learning management, a full LMS system where we can pre-purchase OSHA trainings and build out company specific trainings using our AI feature there to help with content creation. So really just a deep HRIS offering. On the employee side, entirely self-service. So they'll be able to make updates to their bank account. They'll be able to get their pay stubs, all of their company documents right there, their tax forms at the end of the year surface for them. So very much a full HRIS system. But also on their end, kind of tying into the benefits management piece, we help a ton of our clients streamline that open enrollment process, right? So from that same employee portal, they can actually go through the open enrollment, select from the benefit plans that your team's offering, make those elections, and then your broker or your team can approve them before MITRE syncs them back to the carriers, as well as just updates in the payroll module. Same thing with 401k, 360-degree EDI connections with 50 or 60 of the major 401k providers today. So really sort of eliminating the amount of systems needed and delivering a seamless process across HR benefits management. And also on that same thread there, we integrate with the major players like Employee Navigator. So if we have a great relationship with the broker and we don't want to disrupt where we're doing open enrollment, we integrate directly with Employee Navigator, so we can still sort of just deliver that seamless process where after onboarding, employee gets kicked over to Employee Navigator. After open enrollment, they sync the benefit elections back so that payroll is up to date, and just making sure your team is not missing anything or responsible for file uploads or double entry every time a life qualifying event happens. I'd say those two pieces, Sarah, if you want to jump back up, those two modules there, really not even construction specific. It's really just what allows our customers to take advantage of a full human capital management system like MITRE. These next three are really where traditional, HR payroll systems have fallen short. Field operations, obviously, just super flexible with how folks track time. From the mobile app using geolocation features, I can put a kiosk on the job site where folks can clock in and out using a pin or geofenced features, take photo recognition, however you want to capture it there, or just grid-based entry where supervisors or foremen might be keying in for their project or their crew. And not just capturing those labor hours, right? If we are tracking pieces of equipment and want to capture the hours and the cost associated with its usage out in the field, track quantities at the cost code level for production tracking on our projects, we can do all of that and sent through a custom approval process where you define, how many steps are there in that process and who's involved at each step before it's just sitting in payroll ready to be processed. Also, other features through there, like helping with the labor force scheduling and seeing where folks need to be, who's on the project, documents or notes attached to that project, as well as generating those daily reports so foremen can very quickly pull in a summary of who was on the job site based on the timesheets, pull in those equipment timesheets, add the quantity logs to the daily report, add photos, add notes, and then generate a very clean PDF with just a summary of all the work that was done on the job site that day or that week. Payroll and compliance really are bread and butter and where we will spend the majority of the time today, unless we get a lot of messages in the chat on other areas. But a full payroll processor and the ability to handle the nuances associated with construction. So really, like Sarah mentioned earlier, everybody we work with is a contractor. They are hyper-focused on getting their detailed labor costs broken out the way they need them. And really, they're fully burdened labor, not earnings, but taxes, benefits, workers' comp, everything broken out across the different dimensions they're using in Acumatica, the projects, the cost codes, cost type, class, location, et cetera. How do we break those out and make sure we have that level of detail we need from our labor costs to still run those accurate job cost reports? But also for most customers, we're juggling multiple unions. We are non-union, but we're doing a ton of prevailing wage projects, and we have to generate the certified payroll reports at the end of the week. And feels like every week now there's a new city or state or compliance agency that is creating a new certified payroll format. So how do we make it really easy to generate those different reports and submit them to those websites or the GC? And then just job-based payroll taxes, actions based in Ohio. I know we got a lot of customers throughout that region. Like Ohio itself has hundreds of locality taxes based on the county you're working in. So, as we pull down projects from Acumatica, MITRE looks at the job address and, when somebody submits a timesheet on there, we look at those earnings associated with that project and the address, and that's how we are applying any local, state, or federal taxes that need to be withheld on those earnings. So really just kind of getting into the weeds there on some of the nuances that traditional payroll companies just don't tend to handle very well for contractors. And then the last module here, expense management, ability to sync in third-party credit cards, all Visa, MasterCard, Amex programs. That way we can pull in the Amex card, assign it to Johnny. When he swipes out in the field, he gets a text message from MITRE saying, upload a picture of your receipt. He can snap a picture of his receipt and allocate that similar to a timesheet, to a project, to a cost code, have it go through the approval process before we push that back to Acumatica, so we can include that miscellaneous spend with our labor costs at the job level in our reporting. So works similarly with those reimbursements as well. They're just paid out through payroll, but really easy way to capture receipts, get the job cost detail, and push back to our job cost report in Acumatica. Awesome. And I'd say most of the time when we do connect with folks, there's really two things we typically see. Usually, like, they're just kind of running things out of the legacy ERP, or they've transitioned to Acumatica already, and they're managing things through there. And a lot of times kind of fall short across the few different areas, being like the HR, the benefits, the time tracking, if we are trying to fully outsource payroll. So it creates a lot of manual workarounds when we're just operating out of the ERP itself for everything. or we've layered on separate point solutions and we're trying to integrate that with the ERP, which usually between those leads to some clunky integrations, some file uploads or some duplicate entry. So really MITRE's goal is to consolidate those systems and make it, MITRE with Acumatica and deliver a seamless experience. I think on the alternative here on the bottom slide, like the last thing we want to do is be managing onboarding and have to then take their bank account, their withholding information, and set that up in payroll. We don't want to approve that PTO request and then have to go set that up in payroll. Same thing with the open enrollment. They go through the open enrollment process. Do we now need to download a report, or are we manually keying into the ERP the new benefit election? So a lot of symmetries between HR, benefits, payroll that MITRE just allows folks to consolidate systems and deliver a seamless workflow across. Awesome. And MITRE in Acumatica, what does that look like? Acumatica, obviously, you can see here the cloud ERP is the branding, and born and built in the cloud, similar to MITRE. So very easy integration. Everything is API based between the systems. There's no third-party connection or connector required. We plug directly into their APIs. I won't go super deep on this slide because there's also just a ton of metadata that's not broken out here, but essentially, as you can see, all of the work breakdown structure from Acumatica, right? Our projects, our cost codes, our GL accounts, entities, departments, classes, locations, etc. All of that is set up and managed in Acumatica. It just syncs down to MITRE, and we are mirroring that so that as folks are submitting time, expenses, we're processing the payroll, we're tracking those labor hours and those labor costs at the proper structure that you have set up in Acumatica. And then on the flip side, being the HRIS system, as we hire onboard employees, we're pushing employees over to Acumatica. As we track time and process payroll, we sync the labor hours and job costed journal entries back to Acumatica. If we're doing the expense management, we push those into the expense claims. So bi-directional integration, and everything can be set up on a daily sync or do a real-time push or pull at any point to update your two systems. And we've had a lot of success. I think Gib is actually on this call today. So, shout out to Gib for the work he did on the charter construction deal that we're highlighting here. But Charter is a large self-performing GC out of Nashville doing large commercial concrete projects. They do a ton of work throughout Tennessee, but also the surrounding states, and had significant challenges just with job costing their labor, but also handling a ton of different prevailing wage rates. And, how do we manage the fringe offset, make sure we're not overspending on labor costs, generate certified payrolls in a few different dimensions, and then make sure the labor costs are hitting Acumatica, appropriately. And so team fluctuates dependent on projects and year, but anywhere from 500 on the low count to 800. And really the reason we won is it was a seamless integration with Acumatica. We were able to walk them through exactly how their labor costs are going to get back into Acumatica in a way that's going to work for the reports that they had been running in Acumatica for years. And so really the explanation there, the ability to outsource the payroll processing. So they were managing this in-house through computeries, and 500 to 800 employees, obviously a very time-consuming process to manage multi-state locality payroll taxes on a weekly basis, and quarterly and annual tax filings, W-2s at the end of the year. So big piece there was the ability to outsource the payroll, but also handle their complex requirements across prevailing wage certified payroll. And then also they had a disparate system similar to the slide we showed earlier, where they were using a legacy HR tool to manage HR in a separate system for benefits, and nothing talked to the payroll through computeries. So it was a series of file uploads and duplicate entry to hire new employees, get them set up in 3 different systems, and ultimately be ready to go for payroll. So really, really exciting win here with the Action Acumatica team, and have several other case studies since we've launched our partnership. Awesome. And I think we are at the demonstration piece, so I will steal the screen share, I believe, Sarah. Curious, anyone in the chat, if you want to drop questions or if there's anything specific, the folks want to see, feel free to drop that in there and we can, potentially adjust the demonstration to fit, whatever folks have shared. Awesome. And Sarah or Sullivan, are y'all able to see my screen? Or do we need you to stop sharing?
It's perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. So this is the main MITRE dashboard for those of you who are seeing this for the first time. As we mentioned, cloud-based solution, you'll be able to come in here and from an admin perspective, interact with every one of those modules, those 5 modules that we highlighted. Kind of going through a day in life, I think from the applicant tracking or recruiting side, again, just a really easy way for your team to manage and create those job board postings through MITRE. So we can create all of our different positions that we're hiring for and post them directly to Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Google Job Boards, which will syndicate across some other smaller boards. And we'll also work with your team to embed this on your company's career page if you wanted to show all open roles here, or have a link where they can click to apply. And from there, it's that MITRE hosted page where now they're coming in here and applying for that assistant project manager role. And essentially anything you've built out description wise for this job opening, they'll be able to review that and then go through, in this case, a 3-step application process. Really depends on the role. Sometimes these are very simple, couple questions, and we're requiring a resume or a license for that, that applicant to upload. Other ones, there's multiple pages for them to jump through before they can submit that. But regardless, as soon as they do, that all pushes back to the job posting that you've created in MITRE. Anybody in here set up as a hiring manager or on the hiring team is able to click in and review those applicants who have applied. We can interact with Bodhi, the candidate here, and see his resume, work history, education, really anything we captured in a structured way during that hiring process. Review his response to any of the screener questions for this posting. And then the team can leave notes on Bodhi as we're interviewing. Other than that, just as we kind of progress Bodhi here through our hiring process, we're able to communicate with him via SMS, text message, or email straight from the candidate profile. So just consolidate that communication with the candidate. And then ultimately, if we did want to move Bodhi to that offer stage and we decided, hey, we're going to send them an offer letter, the ability to create those templated offer letters and send out essentially fillable docs where we can now come in here and, we've already preloaded this template and we can just say, what is, the job title, the start date, the salary, any of those pre-filled fillable fields that you've created within your templates to send this out, collect a new signature on his offer letter, and ultimately, from there, convert Bodhi the candidate to Bodhi an employee. So really, really easy process there to just collect the resumes and consolidate the candidates and push them through that hiring process. Ultimately, if we do decide to hire Bodhi, we can convert him to hired here, and it just takes Bodhi the candidate and converts him to Bodhi a team member, and he'll be sitting here ready to go through that onboarding process in MITRE. Which in MITRE, you can see we have some folks already set up here. This is all just a digital checklist that we can essentially work with your team to build out. It's really easy, really all the personal information we're going to collect, EEO data like gender, ethnicity for the EEO1 reporting, the I-9 process, go through that entirely digital, integrate with E-Verify if we need to. We'll surface the withholding form for them to take them through a step-by-step questionnaire, complete that. Connects to their direct deposit. So we use Plaid where they can log into their bank using username and password or do accounting rounding on the back end. If we're doing background or drug testing, we integrate with Checker. So you can actually order those results or order those tests straight through the candidate or the employee if we're doing it during onboarding profile and get the results right back, as well as just digitizing any fillable or signable docs. So our company handbook, our safety guide, our drug policies, whatever we're sending out, we can apply them to all team members, specific departments, or types of employees so that they get the right set of documents, are prompted to review and collect e-signatures on all of those. Additionally, any forms or certifications that we're going to track and require them to upload, like their licenses or different trainings, we can include that. They'll be prompted to do that. It'll set up an expiration date. We can notify them as well as their manager. And then just any custom tasks on the employer side. So we'll typically see a long laundry list that we're either assigning to the employee or their direct manager, somebody in HR, as we're setting them up to issue them a cell phone, issue them a vehicle, a monitor, whatever it might be on the employer side. And then custom fields, just anything we want to capture on the employee side as we're onboarding to run reports on. So you can see here, we got a t-shirt size, and maybe they're getting a MITRE t-shirt in their size on the first day. So really easy to build out those checklists, and then depending on the type of employee we are hiring, as we enroll them in a checklist, we'll be able to see exactly where they're at in that process. When we click into onboarding, we can see what have they completed on the employer side, what is still needed to be complete. If we need to make one-off adjustments to their checklist, we can come in here and take out a document that they need to complete or add in an additional form or certification for them to upload. So everything very, very easily adjusted once they're in the onboarding process or before we do enroll them in that onboarding checklist. A number of other HR pieces, which we'd be happy to do a deep dive if anybody is super curious around some of the other, what the LMS looks like, what the performance reviews look like, et cetera. I'm happy to schedule some additional time to go through that. I think real quickly on the time tracking piece, obviously a number of different ways folks can do this, especially at larger organizations. There's not a one size fits all. Some teams might be out in the field using geolocation features or site-bound clock-in and clocking themselves in and out. Other folks will create custom reports in MITRE for their supervisors. Everything really, really clean and easy for the team to use, where we could come in and say, right now we're looking at team member jobs and cost codes. So, across our pay period, we can see all of our employees, the, different projects that they've been working on each day, and even the cost code on that project. But if we wanted a different report or we wanted to group it by project, we flip it on its head, and now we're looking at all of our jobs and just the total daily hours on the project and, what employees were working on that project each day of the week. And we can approve labor hours straight from this view. If this was a view we liked, we'd save it as a template, either a personal or shared report, so we can run this, each time without having to configure anything over here. And if we wanted to adjust labor hours or bulk create for my crew or project, we can create those different reports, and folks can come in here and set up the employee, the cost code they were working on, and their hours throughout the week, tag pieces of equipment to those timesheets if they needed to. So really easy process, whether we are clocking in and out via the mobile app and just doing this as a review process, or we have foremen or supervisors who are responsible for just bulk creating their team's time across projects, cost codes, equipment, et cetera. It's worth noting too, regardless of how that time is collected, we can create policies based on specific projects, departments, types of employees, but that is essentially, what is required. Do we want to require a job and cost code? So what's required to submit the time? And then what does that approval process look like? How many steps are there in the approval process? And, who's involved at each step in the approval process? So really easy way to make sure timesheets, if Johnny's on 5 different projects, that first step might be routing those timesheets to 5 different job supervisors for that first layer of approval. Once those are approved, they're just sitting in payroll, which, really where a lot of the magic will happen. I'm sure, most of the contractors on this call are probably running into some prevailing wage, or they're, union, and they're juggling multiple union rate tables. Very easy process in MITRE. Within payroll settings, we have the concept of pay rate groups, which are essentially just your pay tables. So if we click into, Adams County prevailing wage rates, this could be a set of Davis-Bacon rates. If we're working in a new state in a specific county, we could just name it Adams County, for example. But it's really just whatever we want to use to identify this set of rates. And then from there, what are our prevailing wage classifications? What is the base rate? What is the fringe rate associated with that? And then we can take these different prevailing wage rate tables and apply them to projects. Very similar process with the unions, right? Those look a little bit different. We're going to want to, set up the union classifications with the base rate, but then before that or after that, we're going to come in here and, based on the union rate sheet that they send over, we can attach it to the rate table here and then essentially build out all of those different fringes that we need to send back to the union, whether they're non-taxable or taxable, dollar per hour, percent per earnings, overtime eligible, et cetera. And then similar process, right? We are just coming in here and what are the correct fringes across each union classification. Within that as well, if we do have union contractors on the call who run into reciprocity rules, where what happens when somebody from local 1 or signatory to local 1 goes and works in, local 2, we can actually dictate, hey, when somebody from local 1 goes and works in local 2, do we want to pay them the work local? Do we want to pay them the home local base rate, or should we just use the higher of the two? But then what do we want to do with the fringes? Should the fringes go to their home local 1, or should it go to the work local 2? And if we say the work local, we can then say, are there any fringes, though, that should still go back to local 1? And so maybe we want to send their dues and their training back to local 1, but everything else should go to local 2. So it can get very hairy really quickly, depending on the part of the country you're in and what your union reciprocity agreements look like. But just a very simple way to set that up once, and then know that as your team's submitting hours and getting paid, MITRE's fringe report will update accordingly. But regardless, if we're a union contractor, if we're non-union and we're setting up prevailing wage rates tables, as those come down, those projects from Acumatica, your team is able to click into that job and say, hey, this is a certified payroll project, and then also what prevailing wage rate table do I need to assign to this job? And so that's how, as timesheets come in, we look at the rate table assigned, the employee's classification, and then pay them the correct pay rate. If we have multiple trades on a project, maybe we have, an electrical union, we have a HVAC union, and we have an operators union, and they're all on the same project. Very easy to set up those different trades and then apply the right local to the project. So we might have a few different trades working on this prevailing wage or union project. Once those are approved, though, those are all flowing through to payroll, where we make it very, very easy for your team to, again, just review the labor hours across the weekly, daily totals. It's this pivot table function, so you can still create these custom reports in payroll. This one by earning type to see regular versus overtime or PTO, and then the projects that they were working on throughout the week. If we have questions, we can drill into specific timesheets. And even at the timesheet level, on every single timesheet, when we click in, we can see if it's just a private project, it's just going to be employee's normal base rate. If it's prevailing wage, what's the pay rate table assigned? What's Johnny's classification? What is the base rate? Here's the fringe rate, but we're actually offsetting all $25 through your employer fringe contributions. And if we wanted to click in, we can actually see that allocation happening. So a lot of power there with just automating the way union rates and prevailing wage rates get assigned. And from here, as timesheets look good, as PTO requests look good, we review and approve and make sure that payroll looks correct and labor hours are accurate. Once we click continue here, this is where MITRE essentially takes over. I mean, we pre-process the payroll for the team. So very much an in-house process. Your team has prepped and approved payroll. And, we allow you to run reports on this payroll prior to processing. So we could run a full payroll register. We could take this out in Excel if we wanted to, but we can see the employees, all their earnings, employer taxes, benefit deductions. We're paying out a bunch of job-based per diems. So really like 360-degree view into the payroll. We can run earnings summaries, deductions and contributions we could even see what these ledger entry line items are going to look like before they sync back to Acumatica. And this is all something that's, configured in MITRE, and we'll jump to that in a second. But all of this available for your team prior to processing, just to give you complete confidence before you do go ahead, click approve, and that's where MITRE will take over and debit employer bank account, issue those direct deposits, pull out the proper amount for taxes and remit that on the schedule, handle your child support garnishments, everything like that. Last couple pieces we'll get to for a lot of folks. After we've processed that payroll really easily, how do we just generate those certified payroll reports? We could go all projects at once if we just need 10 different WH-347s. If we wanted to go job by job, because we have a few different formats we need to generate, we could come in here and select the project, select the week, the state, which will then decide, is there a state level format that you need, or are we doing like an LCP tracker or just a traditional WH-347? It's a very quick process after we've done the payroll. And then from there, we click create, and MITRE will spit out that certified payroll report in whatever format we need with the classification, hours worked each day, gross amount, and their deductions broken out for just all the employees who are on that project and paid through there. Other than that, I'd say if the next big or last big piece we want to hit on with your team is just, obviously we mentioned pulling down those projects and cost codes, departments, et cetera. That's how folks are allocating their time and then therefore their labor costs, but also we're syncing down your GL accounts, and we're doing that mapping with your team. We go through an exercise during every implementation where across payroll, across expenses, benefit types, we are mapping this all back to the correct GL account in Acumatica. But then from there, we'll come into this level of detail screen, and depending on the dimensions you're using in the ERP, we're essentially coming in across all of these, and it's all customer facing. So we could click in here and update it right now if we wanted to, but across earnings, taxes, benefits, workers' comp, et cetera, like, do we need this broken out by team member, job, cost code, cost type, department, location, class, et cetera? And this is where we essentially work with your team to build those job costed journal entries that we're then spitting out after you do process payroll. So everything super configurable and really essentially allows your team to build out whatever level of granularity you need in your labor costs to make sure they're pushing back to Acumatica at the proper dimensions you're tracking. Every implementation, we work with your team on this, and essentially as we are setting y'all up, we go through multiple weeks of training, but the final step of every implementation is, we do a full audit, and then we do a dummy payroll side by side with your existing payroll solution and actually show you all the payroll calculations, the tax calculations are correct, and what these journal entries would look like syncing back into Acumatica. So obviously a couple month-long process there, but very detailed, and give your team complete confidence before we actually do process that first payroll and then sync that back into your Acumatica job cost report.